Thanks for joining us today on 18th Century Cooking. I'm John Townsend, and today we'll be preparing potted meats in the 18th century style. In the past, we've done a whole series on food preservation techniques in the 18th century, and we touched on at the time the idea of potting or potting meats, but we didn't get a chance to do it. Today, we are going to pot this beef. Potted meat recipes can be very complex. They can take a while to do, but I wanted to find something very simple. It took a while, but there's a very simple potted beef recipe in Charlotte Mason's A Lady's Assistant from 1777. And this one's called To Pot Cold Beef. And it's actually, the recipe starts after you have a cut of beef that's already been cooked and you want to pot it. Maybe like you've eaten half of it, but you want to preserve the next half over the next several weeks. And so to get started with this one, I've actually taken a chuck roast, and you need to cook that well so that it falls apart. The best way to do that really is either to cook it in a Dutch oven for 2 or 3 or even 4 hours at a nice low temperature, or if you want to cheat in a modern oven or a modern kitchen, you could use your slow cooker and just put it on low and let your chuck roast cook overnight. Just cover this over with water, or if you want to add a little bit of flavor in it, you could use a cider or something like that in there to give it some liquid. Make sure to cover that up. In the time period, these recipes, they would actually say to use a ceramic vessel to bake your meat in and then cover it over with paper. So you want to trap that moisture, and that's the idea here. We want a very, very moist and fall apart kind of meat. So here's our finished meat, and you can see how amazingly tender it is. I wanted something that was just fall apart, and that's what we're looking for here. What we need to do with this meat is actually tease it apart, tear it apart, and remove all the fat or any kind of sinews in it. We want just plain straight meat, that's all. First, we put our meat into the bowl, and now we're gonna put in some more spices. Let's add another bit of salt and some pepper, and she also calls for some nutmeg or some mace in there as well to help season this. And then let's add some butter. I don't know. She doesn't call for an exact amount, so let's say 1/3 as much in weight as the amount of meat that you have here. Now that we've got all our ingredients, we need to pulverize this, pound this into a mix that's just very, very smooth, like a pate. That's what we're looking for here. So our meat is nice and pulverized. It's very fine. She even says sometimes referring to it changing color. It's not like turn yellow, which means you can tell it's very finely pulverized. That's what we're looking for. Now it's time to put it into the pots. And she actually, in some of the recipes, mentions using a smaller pot like this. So you want to have a pot that's not too big, because once you break the seal on this, it's going to start to go bad. So you don't want to have a large pot. You want to have a 1 or 2 serving kind of pot. That way you can use it all at once. These pots are available on our website. I'll make sure to put a link down in the description section. Pack it tightly into the bottom of the pots. We're trying to get rid of any air pockets. And we're going to fill it up to within, say, about 1 inch, or if your pot's really shallow, say 1/2 inch to the top. But we want to leave some spot at the top for our clarified butter when we get done packing these pots. It's hard to find a good, safe recipe, and one that's easy to do for potted meat. The trick is at this stage that we can't just pour clarified butter on these, because they would go bad. But some of the recipes actually call for taking these pots before they get the clarified butter, putting them in the oven and warming them back up to temperature, say 200, 250 degrees for 10 or 15 minutes. We want to make sure that all the meat is basically pasteurized in these pots. So that's what we're gonna do with these. We're gonna set these aside, and I'm gonna take them and I'm gonna put them in the oven for at about 200, 250 degrees for 10 or 15 minutes, however long it takes to get it so that they're heated all the way through. Then we can bring them back. Once your little pots are heated fully up to temperature, you can bring them out of the oven, and while they're still warm, You want to pour clarified butter on top. You want at least 1/4 of an inch, probably a 1/2 inch, or maybe a whole inch of clarified butter up on top of these little pots. Here they are, and they finally cooled off. I did have issues with the clarified butter. It shrinks just like wax does. When you're making wax candles, if you've ever done that, the wax will kind of shrink and it'll give you a cavity in the center. So you'll need to kind of keep filling this up depending on how much clarified butter you put in there. That's why you want to put a nice thick layer, so even if it shrinks, it doesn't shrink away from the meat completely. To make them last a little bit longer, they should have another covering to put on top to protect even the clarified butter. So you can put a little cloth on there and tie that off. That's why these have a little ring around them, so you can tie them off and the fabric stays on. You could use something like a hog's bladder, and we have the imitation hog's bladder on the website. That's another even better seal for these to keep these longer. In the 18th century, they would have stored these down in their cellar where it was nice and cool. And even then, they did not expect these to last very long. Generally, the recipes say that they'll be good for a month or 6 weeks, maybe 2 months at the max. So, in our modern context, you'll want to store these in the refrigerator until you're ready to use them, and they should be good. And isn't this interesting? It's very similar to, say, what would happen. It's sort of like canning, right? You get all these things up to temperature, and then you try to seal the air away from them. It's exactly what we're doing with this. So I've got some toast here to try this out. So let's crack open one of these and find out exactly how it tastes. And you know, there aren't a lot of directions. It doesn't say how they would actually end up using this potted meat. But I'm gonna guess that they would have it on toasts or crackers or something like that. Let's find out. Wonderful flavor. Tastes great, especially on something like the toasts. All those little spices come out. I might add more nutmeg to it, but it's got a wonderful texture and a wonderful taste. And it is one of the ways that they preserved meat over time. Instead of having a salted beef, they many times would have a product like this. And it was really nice because you can take these with you. If you're going someplace and you want to take some food with you, it has its pot with it. And it's ready to eat whenever you are. You don't even need toasts or crackers or anything like that. You can just scoop right in there and eat it if you're hungry. A really interesting way of preserving things, almost like canning today. Very, very great. This one was really interesting. It was fun to research. I hope you give it a chance, especially if you're a reenactor. This would be wonderful to put into your living history persona. You could take one of these to an event. That would be great. And if you're just somebody out there who's interested in history, it's a great little experiment to try at home. I want to thank you for coming along as we experiment, as we try these things, as we savor the flavors and the aromas of the 18th century.